A Song for Silas by Laurie Wick. Chapter 11. "Hello, Perkins. Is my aunt home?" After some moments, the front door had opened, and Amy was addressing her question to an elderly gentleman with a full head of grey hair and a stately manner about him that he wore like a cloak. "Of course, Miss Amy." The man nodded, his face expressionless. The couple moved into the foyer as Perkins stepped aside and opened the door wide. "I'll tell Mrs. Randall you're here." His manner was so formal that it was almost comical. After he moved away, Amy looked at Silas. She had to stifle a giggle with her hand as she watched his brows raise and eyes twinkle. Knowing her laughter would only start his own, Silas turned away from her to survey his surroundings. Dual staircases rose from the foyer to the second floor in a straight, formal fashion. To the right of the foyer was a small parlor with large windows overlooking the porch. In one corner stood a small fireplace. Another room, appearing to be a library, branched off the parlor, but Silas did not move to investigate. His eyes swung to the left of the foyer and took in a large living room running almost the full length of the house. This room, as well as the foyer, sported huge windows, some accented with colored or ornately etched glass. The living room overlooked the porch and was full of beautiful furniture. Several doors exited off this room, and Silas felt an urge to explore. He glanced at Amy to find her watching him. "Were you hoping I'd be impressed?" Silas's expression was knowing. "Are you?" Amy's grin was downright cheeky. "What if I said no?" Silas asked with an elaborate shrug. "I'd say you were a poor liar, Si Cameron." "You'd be right," Silas said with a laugh. "Amy!" A deep, almost masculine voice called from the living room. Amy turned and rushed into the arms of a tall, reed-slim woman. Silas watched as the two shared a long hug. When at last they separated, Bev Randall held Amy at arm's length. The unfeigned concern Silas saw written on her face endeared her to him immediately. "How is Grant?" "A little better every day, but he's been in so much pain," Amy answered in a trembling whisper, and Silas knew without seeing her face that she was fighting tears. Her aunt also knew and pulled her once again into a firm embrace. "I wanted to come, but, well—" The words died in the older woman's throat as Amy nodded her head in silence. Once again the two hugged, this time in unspoken understanding. Silas suddenly found himself the center of attention. Both women turned to him, and Silas stood quietly, studying Amy's aunt as intently as she was studying him. The face before him was thin, cheeks nearly sunken. Something about her mouth led Silas to believe she didn't smile often. Her eyes were shrewd but not unkind, nor did they waver from his own as she began to speak in an almost stern tone of voice. "From Amy's description, you can't be anyone other than Silas Cameron." She paused, and the young people in the room were almost tense as they waited for her to continue. But when she did, there was kindness in her rather gravelly voice. "I must admit that when Amy told me about you 4 years ago, I believed it could only be a 14-year-old's imagination that could create such size. But I was wrong," she said as she stepped forward with her hand outstretched. "You are big." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Randall." "Well, please call me Bev, and allow me to thank you for coming to help Grant and Amy." "Aunt Bev," Amy broke in, "how did you know Silas was here to help us?" "Oh, that's easy. 2 nights ago a large bearded man arrived by train when the skies were dumping rain on Neilsville. He rented a horse and headed in the direction of the Nolan farm." Bev smiled at Amy, who was beginning to catch on, and continued her story to a still confused Silas. "You see, Silas, there isn't much in this town that goes on without my knowledge. Remembering Amy's description of you, and the direction you headed that night, along with finding you in my front room, well, you see, it didn't take a detective." The three laughed at this logical explanation for Bev's nosiness, but Amy sobered quickly upon remembering something. "Aunt Bev, had you heard about the robbery at the Carleton farm?" Bev nodded silently, and Silas and Amy watched a pained, troubled expression cross over her features. She opened her mouth to speak, but just then the front door burst open, and in strode Evan Randall.